Repetition in marketing, right? All about repetition in marketing. Dan Wu, Unquestionable, 831-459-4036 if you would like to join into the show. There's a lot happening in the Santa Cruz area around conversations about housing. It hasn't gone away. It will never go away. It's going to be something that we never solve. It's just going to be that thing that you come home to, and you're like, should I put this on this side of the room? No, it kind of blocks the feng shui. How about I put it right here? Oh no, now I can't open the door. And housing issues are always going to be that way. However, there's a huge homeless encampment at the most visible spot for commuters going in and out of this town that is being overrun with mud right now and has spotlights over it, which are obviously necessary because people need to be able to see, and it also creates a safety measure for there to be visibility over there. But it really, in many ways, resembles a prison camp. But I'm also a realist and know that not everyone that's homeless, including places where there's disasters that happen. I'm not being heartless when I say not everyone can stay in the place where they grew up or in the place where they decided they wanted to live. Sometimes things don't work out. But I also want to work to help the people that want to help themselves find places to live. And that's something that's been on my mind as I come in and out of Santa Cruz in my privileged life, where I work in Aptos area. I live on the west side. I go to the Bay Area to have fun sometimes. My partner lives in LA, and I'm about to probably take that leap myself pretty soon here. And who knows, maybe it won't work out for me down there, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try to make it work. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen to me and I might end up homeless at some point. Who knows? It can happen to anyone. And for some of the people living in that encampment over there, it has happened to them where they did everything right in their life and something happened where they ended up living over there in a tent in the mud. 831-459-4036. That's actually a little detour. Like I said, my manic train of thought really got sparked by that because it was a nice sunny day when I was on my way up here, and then it just started pouring all of a sudden, and I thought, wow, what if I was just living outside right now? But what I was going to talk about, and what I do want to talk about today, happy to address that issue with people if they would like. But what I'd like to really talk about today is a more overarching conversation about the state of conversation around housing costs in Santa Cruz. Someone in my family who reads the Sentinel, watches corporate news, said to me yesterday at a Super Bowl gathering that I went to for a minute, how'd they go and do that? How'd they just go and pass rent control? They just passed it, the city. Like, what are they thinking? And the idea behind that comment was that person felt that because there was a rent control measure on the ballot last year and that specific rent control didn't pass, that the faux rent control that the Matthewses and Terrazas and the rest of them passed in their last meeting before the old council disbanded was somehow rent control. And there's a lot of people coming around saying that we should have extended the rent freeze because the rent control conversation is going to continue and landlords are going to react drastically in the meantime to cushion any sort of effect of any sort of regulations that come in. If I'm not mistaken, you need a home every day, right? The argument goes that you need health care. Everyone has a body. Everyone needs health care. So shouldn't we make health care accessible to everybody in some form? So housing is something that everyone needs. Living in the woods is no longer an option. It's great. It's fun to camp. Love doing it. But it's no longer an option. So there are too many people on Earth for us to just decide, I want to live here in the woods today, and I want to live here in the woods today. Unless it's an emergency, and that happens. But, or unless you're camping. But everyone needs this every single day. And how is it that every time you try to regulate something that everyone needs every day in one of the least regulated industries on Earth, the people who benefit the most from it cry communism? They cry communism. They say, you're communists. You want to destroy capitalism, and you don't want us to make money, and you want to make us into homeless landlords. Meanwhile, a person close to me just alerted me to something they learned on February 1st when they went to pay their rent through an online portal, which was that their rent had gone up $450 or 32% all at once on February 1st. And it had gone up $300 or at that time 28% as they did the math for me from the original amount on March 1st of 2018, right before the rent freeze. Right before the rent freeze, they had their rent go up 28%. And then right after the rent freeze ended, they had their rent go up 32%. Now, the rent freeze didn't end until December, mid-December. So that means that their landlord claims they gave them notice in November about this rental increase during the rent freeze. They gave them notice during the rent freeze on the parlay that the rent freeze would end. So then that would be enough notice to raise their rent immediately after the rent freeze ended. And they say they notified that tenant. And that tenant says that they have a tendency to not get their own mail and to get the mail of other tenants in the neighborhood. So they said, why didn't you post it on the online portal? And the landlord said, oh, that doesn't satisfy the legal requirements. Hold on one second, caller. That doesn't satisfy the legal requirements of notification. But I thought to ask that person, why didn't you just ask them when they typed it, why didn't they just post that document? They didn't handwrite the document, I'm sure, when they sent it to you, right? Why didn't they just post that document online so you could check it and in good faith say, oh, I missed that piece of mail. Okay, I have to pay this. But no, this is what's going on. And that's why a lot of people were fighting for the rent freeze to stay in place. And that's why some really good people are ending up sleeping in tents, because there are people that have irritated every connection they have and they can't sleep on a couch anymore. But there's some people that don't have that option because every other house has people sleeping on the couch already. And now they're sleeping in tents because their rent goes up 70% in 1 year. And that is insane. The mail may not have arrived properly at this tenant's house. And then all of a sudden they figured out that them and their housemate are out $500 almost this month that they didn't plan for at all. So the property management company could pad the income of someone that most likely owns that home outright. And if they do owe money on it, it's probably because they took out money to buy another home on the equity of that home, which was probably worth much more by the time they took out that equity. This is how these math equations work. Hello. How's it going?
Hang up.
Oh, no, what's up?
Numerous times to verify your business with Google.
Whoa, we are just getting the junk mail calls like crazy. Callers, I got one in the lobby, which I entertained for a moment because I was bored. They were going to offer me a pain-relieving pad for my neck, and it was really funny until it got boring, and then I put the no-call button on there. But this is really funny. If you're a human being and you want to call and you want to talk about housing in Santa Cruz, you could call 831-459-4036. It's really funny because when they said please don't hang up, I really thought that I recognized the voice of a landlord activist who was like, don't hang up. I want to disagree with you. You're wrong on everything. And I was really, really excited, but it was a robot. And now I'm mad. And you know what? I'm going to play Mirrors by Homebrew and regroup. 831-459-4036. If you want to call in and pitch your ideas for solutions to the housing conundrum in everywhere, not just Santa Cruz, you can call 831-459-4036, or you can text into that number. I'm Dan Wu. This is Unquestionable. I'm heated. I can't believe this happened to my friend. Their rent went up 70% this year, and they got notified of it during the rent freeze in a very dubiously legal way, and I want people's thoughts on that. If the Renshaws of the world are listening, I don't usually call names out, but they've been very public about their heading of organizations in disagreement with me. So if any of their friends want to call in, 831-459-4036.
Don't be afraid of bad news, 'cause it's the only kind we have here. It's easy to pass judgment when you're first starting to live all on your own. No, you're not alone. You're just not leaning on the wall. I am a skunk repelling everything I find. Searching, not finding any shred of peace of mind. Is it courage to boldly admit to all I lack? Imagine phantom father is never coming back. Break all the mirrors, don't be afraid of bad news, 'cause it's the only kind we have here. Break all the mirrors, don't be afraid of bad luck, 'cause it's the only kind we have here. Are you better than me? 'Cause I'm no better than you. Are you better than me? 'Cause I'm no better, no better. I play my hand conservatively, 'cause the deck ain't in my favor. Yeah, palm the good ones for later. I don't have a plan, just a sleight of hand. You're a good man. You deserve a good woman. You're a good man. You deserve a good woman. What the hell are you doing with me? What the hell are you doing with me? Break all the mirrors, don't be afraid of bad luck, 'cause it's the only kind we have here. Break all the mirrors, don't be afraid of bad news, 'cause it's the only kind we have here.
Thank you so much to Ducky Moppin and her homebrew crew for that track, Mirrors. Thank you so much to them. And do make say think for the first track, 1978, which have been my theme music for the whole 6 months doing these shows. We're going to have a guest on next week. We're going to have on a doctor who's somewhat famous because he's based in the LA area and he has a lot of celebrity clients and he does that whole thing. He specializes in, his specialty is not what I want to talk about though, and I made that clear to him that that wasn't really my interest, but that we could have him on the show, and I will give him a chance to dive a little bit into his specialty, but we are going to be focusing on the overprescribing of pharmaceuticals, very harmful pharmaceuticals in the American populace, and how that's a huge problem. And also, I absolutely dumbfound doctors when I go in, once a year, once every couple years for an actual issue that comes up when they ask me if I'm on any medications, and I say no. And as a 33-year-old, and even as a 30-year-old, and even as a 25-year-old, they were shocked that I was like, no, I don't have any regular medications. Yet we seem to be destroying our country and enriching both legal and illegal drug cartels by just the way our doctors are modeled to treat people. So we're going to have Dr. Dudley Danoff on. He's going to be over the phone, so we're going to have text only, but it's going to be pretty sweet, and I'm excited about that. In a couple weeks, we also have UCSC sociology professor Chris Benner coming on to talk about the fact that through a study that he has done with some students and a group called USA Partnership in Silicon Valley, that they were able to ascertain the very obvious fact, I feel, that 90% of people have seen a pay decline in the last 20 years in the Silicon Valley, and by extension, most of San Francisco and Santa Cruz, and even northern Monterey County, based on the fact that costs have gone up so much that 90% of people's incomes have dropped by an average of 14% over the last 20 years, or the median income in real dollar amounts adjusted for inflation has dropped by 14%. And what I also want to look at with him is the fact that something related to today's show is that even the people in the top 10% whose incomes have gone up relative to inflation are struggling to keep up. We have people buying $2.5 million homes on 30-year mortgages with $300,000 a year gross income. Now, $300,000 a year is a lot of money. However, when you pay taxes on that, it's probably more like $180,000 because the tax bracket's a little higher, or $190,000 or $200,000, whatever. And then you take a $2.5 million house and you extend that over a 30-year mortgage. That house now costs about $4.8 million. Now, $200,000 into $4.8 million is about 24. So that means 24 years of their entire income is going to pay for that house. So you tell me where the imbalance is in our society when even the people making $300,000 a year are going to struggle to buy a median priced home in Los Gatos or Saratoga or Mountain View, and then otherwise spend 20 hours and barrels of oil every year, or every week, really, getting into work from places outside of there, so that they can only spend 13 years of their entire income on these not even luxury homes, on these like really kind of lame 1950s and 70s homes that are selling for $1 million here and now $700,000, because guess what? Things are going down. And like $2 and $3 million in Los Gatos and Sunnyvale and stuff like that. But we got a homelessness related text here. Homelessness, a revolution in thinking, revolutionary meeting. It's a PSA. Sure, why not? Someone's wanted to plug a Rethinking of Homelessness event, February 11th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Loudon Nelson Center, Room 1. So if you're interested in joining that conversation in a different way than being on a radio show, there you go. Monday, February 11th, 7 to 9 p.m., a meeting of the Santa Cruz Coalition on Homelessness welcomes people to come in and offer their ideas and hear what the Santa Cruz Coalition on Homelessness is already working on. That's pretty cool. Now, I want to talk about market rate, because that's kind of what the justification is for things like this person that brought up this $750 increase this year on their rent. A lot of people would say, oh, well, they were below market rate before. They were below market rate. They were below market rate. Now, market rate theology has become a blanket excuse basically for cartel-like behavior. Because when you look at mobsters, there's a mobster he's reformed now and he's like a legitimate businessman. So he does interviews and he talks about his time as a mobster. And he talks about selling gasoline in his mafioso way back in the 70s and 80s, or not 70s, but like 80s and 90s. And he would go to the gas stations. He would buy a gas station on a corner with 4 gas stations. And then he would go to all those 3 owners and he says, I'm going to sell gas for a lower price than any of you, no matter what you do. So here's what we're going to do. We're all going to sell gas at the same price. And that's going to be the deal. Now, when you look at the housing market, yes, it is difficult to get into the rental market in a way that's going to put cash in your pocket. But you have someone paying for a massive asset for you. So I have very little sympathy for the people that say that they can't make any money in the rental market as new renters, like they buy a home now or 10 years ago and they're renting it out, that they're not making any money. They're absolutely making money because they're having someone else pay for a massive, massive asset for them. That just doesn't happen in any other investment. It does not happen. And the people that bought the houses in the 60s and 70s and 50s, they were either genius or they just liked this area, or they were very, very lucky. But the same thing's happening in other places. So maybe they were just lucky, and maybe it's just inevitable that we've run out of space or something. I don't know. You can make that argument too. But they're all jacking their rents up to the same price. Now, when you have a better price on a good, you can offer it at a better price. But if you start putting it in the hands of property management, or as I'd like to think of them as capos, that all jack up the price to the same level, that is cartel-like, OPEC-like, mafioso-like behavior. And that's what's happening right now. They're saying, oh, it's market rate, so we all need to jack it up. And then, oh, well, then the market rate went up, so we need to jack it up. And then, oh, people paid that, so we need to jack it up. And where does this end? Where does this end? Hello, you're on KZSE. Whoa, that is windy. Can you cut down on the wind, please?
Oh, sorry. I'm calling from a bus, so I'm doing my best.
That's all good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, what's up?
So a friend of mine told me that you're having a show today about solutions to the housing crisis, or about the housing crisis in general.
Yes, and also the fact, and also the, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
right?
And also about the idea that this problem is bigger than Santa Cruz. Also, I don't like the fact that people throw out that it's a privilege to live in Santa Cruz, because this is happening in a lot of places.
Yeah, no, I think it's ridiculous to say it's a privilege to live here. I mean, what do you say? How can you say that to people who were born and raised here, who, through no fault of their own, now find themselves living in a place that their family's working class salaries can't afford? What do you say to them? Oh, sorry, you got to get out of here? Like, what kind of a cruel, ridiculous thing to say is that?
Well, okay, so what do you think about the idea that since maybe not all of us have the degrees or skills needed for the companies that have grown around here, so they need to bring other people in, so how do you balance that with the idea that people that were born here maybe have some sort of claim to possibly stay here?
Well, I'm not trying to make any kind of nativist claim here. I mean, nobody who is born, nobody's native here except Owasso speaking Ohlone, right? So I'm not trying to make some kind of nativist claim. But what I am saying is that there's a process of class cleansing, that poor people are being pushed out of the community. Many of those people are folks who have lived here, and there's a very traumatic impact when you are pushed away from your community. When you're pushed away from everyone you know, everything you know, there's serious stress-induced physiological and psychological harm done to people. That's my point about folks who were born and raised here. But I think I think your point about like people moving here who have skills that companies here need, that's a question of what kind of work is available, what kind of industries are available, what's the minimum wage here. People in Santa Cruz ought to have a wage that's in line with rents. to be able to stay here. I mean, I'm a firm supporter of rent control. I worked on the Measure M campaign. I do think both those are necessary. I think higher wages as well as rent controls are necessary, because otherwise we find ourselves in a situation where people's wages are going up and rents continue to climb because landlords know that they can capture higher rents because people can afford it. So it's not just a situation of we need higher wages. It's not just a situation of we need broad-scale rent control. We need both of those. And some people might say, well, you need to build more affordable housing. That's the real solution. I don't really think that that's the case. I think it's part of it. I mean, you want to build affordable housing, great, let's do it, let's make it happen. But if you don't have some kind of tenant protections before you build this affordable housing, you're going to be waiting years and years and years for it to actually be constructed, right? And then what happens? Where are all the people that you just built this affordable housing for? They've been priced out of the community for the most part. So I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, well, we need to build affordable housing. It's not just enough to say we need rent control. It's not just enough to say that we need a higher minimum wage and better jobs for folks here. It's really all of the above.
Well, thank you so much for your call. I think I recognize that voice, and how fitting that it was a call from a bus. That was very, very meta setting to get that call from. You can also call in if you agree or disagree with that caller or myself at 831-459-4036. Please, non-robot callers only. And if you mailed a package to the station, it's 459-2811 in our station, or for any other administrative needs that you may have today. It is still coming down fairly hard outside, so my heart out to anyone who slept in a tent last night and is trying to maybe get their life together enough to actually find some solutions to their life. I'm also a realist. I know some people that are born in Santa Cruz. I know some people that are born in many cities that are homeless. And they're homeless in the city that they grew up in because they have burned their bridges. And I get that. I do believe in redemption for everyone, but of the homelessness haters, of the people that are like, oh, homeless people are all bums and da-da-da-da-da, I'll give you a bone. I know a couple people who can't sleep on my couch, and they're like lifelong friends of mine. But, oh, wow, I think someone might have misunderstood me. I hope some people in tents that are trying to get their life together are having an okay time at it because it's raining. That's what I meant. But I don't know if they want to clarify their text message. Thanks for keeping that off the air. Literally, I was looking out and it's raining and I'm thinking, wow, it might be extra hard to get your life together if you slept in a tent last night and you're one of the people that is trying to get their life together and is homeless, maybe to less fault of their own. So, yeah, cool. Oh, I see. It's the same person with the faraway area code. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. So I didn't actually mean to hate on people sleeping in tents. I was sending sympathy out to them for how hard it must be to work on their life in a day when it's muddy and rainy around them. So maybe check your understanding of what I'm saying. Hello, this is Dan Wu. You're on KZSC Santa Cruz. What's up?
Hello, Dan Wu. I was listening to you just on my ride back home, and you hit so many different subjects. One of them was, and this goes back a little bit, healthcare. And there's two things I want to address on that, if it's okay with you. Number one, we don't do healthcare in the United States. We do sick care because the insurance companies don't pay it. If it's not related to sickness in 99% of the cases. Number two, relative to that sort of situation, everybody is not entitled to health care because the doctor has to spend years and years of his life as well as hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that license. The way I would resolve that is put it into the governmental situation of the government pays for the education for the doctor who wants to go through that education. Then that doctor, let's say the first 5 years of his practice, works for minimum wage. And then he can start making some money.
Okay, man. Okay, I would love to take this call next week. No offense.
Okay.
I was using it as an analogy to housing. That's all I was using it as.
Okay. But
Yeah.
with housing,
Huh?
with housing, what about the tax increase every year for houses in general? Who pays for that? Who
Okay.
pays for the upkeep?
Renters do.
The added expense of upkeep.
Renters do. My friends that had that $750 increase during the year that they had the $300 increase, they had a growing pile of sewage under their house due to shoddy work that the landlord had done before, and then they got that notice sent out while the problem was still very slowly being fixed. So thank you so much for your call. It was a little off topic. I appreciate the call. If you want to disagree with me on housing issues today, I did talk about healthcare. It's true. Healthcare is a mess. I very much disagree with the caller on their take on it. I think that everyone is entitled to some healthcare. That's crazy. Just because doctors spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to be in school, that poorer people can't get healthcare? That's insane. But I appreciate insanity in the world. It makes things fun and colorful. Anyways, moving on to the next thing about this cartel-like behavior. I also heard another person recently say that the whole problem is NIMBYism. Now, this person is from San Diego. They currently live in San Francisco and pay $5,000 a month rent, and they have enough money to not think that that's an issue. They even said to me that property crime is out of control to the point where a lot of his neighbors leave their cars unlocked with nothing in them because they would rather the door get open and someone find nothing than break the window, which makes sense, I guess. Yeah, if you have to park on the street, that's actually a pretty good strategy to deal with not having a broken window or just like waking up and having stuff gone from your car. However, it was kind of a callous way that they were presenting this in the sense that they had no problem with market rate rent, even though they're paying $5,000 a month, and said that gentrification's fine because it's benefiting people like them. So you can guess who they were. Sorry, self-hating guy up here. Yep, the worst kind of racist, one that criticizes their own color skin. But they said that we just need to build more. We just need to build more. And it's helping in places like Seattle. And that struck a chord with me because I have a bunch of family in Seattle and I disagree with that. So I went and did some research, and it is dubious at best to say that the building in Seattle is helping with housing prices. In fact, what they are pointing to, and people like the person I was talking to are pointing to, is the fact that housing prices have gone down about 12% in the entire Seattle area on average. And it's very similar to here. They have Amazon, they have Boeing, they have they got Microsoft, they got these huge employers that have dominated the field with some very high paid workers. Anyone that owned a house there said, fine, I'm going to get all that money. All that money is owed to me because I own a house here. So you are going to pay me all of the money that comes into this area because I was here first. And that's what's happening in this area, and that's what's happening in Seattle, and that's what's happening in New York. Now that they have the Amazon office coming there, it's going to get worse. That's what's going to happen it's happening in Austin, Texas. It's happening in Houston. And I will throw a bone to the people that say market rates are real. That market rates are real. They're a real thing. And I will say to that person that said we just need to build more, the building more is not really what's causing this little dip in real estate. That's being caused by overpriced real estate that went up like 150% in most of these areas, 136% according to one study in Seattle. And they're coming down because that was outrageous. And building more is dubious at best on having an effect with that. But I will throw a bone to people that say market rates are real and that you can't fight against them, and say that sometimes, I don't know, this is a drastic solution. Sometimes new cities start because one gets too expensive. That's how we ended up in this country in the first place as English people, partly because we were religious fanatics and the English were like, yo, you guys need to move on a little bit. But also because there are some people that have stuck it out through hundreds of years of poverty in England and prices going up and them sinking further and further next to the massive wealth of the English nobility. And there are some that went and started a new city, and then that city became the happening thing. And that's how all of the cities in the United States happened. Is at a certain point it got too expensive and crowded on the East Coast, so people moved a little bit west. And then it got too crowded and expensive in San Francisco after the gold rush, so people dispersed up, towards other places. And that's how Portland, Oregon started, and that's how Las Vegas started, and I get it. I don't know if I'm at the point where I'm willing to tell all the poor people in Santa Cruz and in Seattle and in San Francisco and San Jose that there's no solution for you. It's time for you to go and start a new city. But I will say that over long periods of time and many generations, those things do happen. And I'm not saying that all gentrification can be stopped. And I'm not saying that we can stop the economy. And I'm not a communist. So I do appreciate capitalism. But there needs to be something other than just building more, especially in an area like Santa Cruz where we're bordered by mountains on one side and the ocean on the other side. Not really sure how you build in an earthquake zone with that kind of geography. One person that actually does do healthcare for me, and I chat with him sometimes, says that rising rents will be corrected by the market. People will eventually refuse to pay the rents by moving out, and that will force landlords to lower rents to keep the places full. I don't agree with this. I think that my friends that had their rent go up $750, if they moved out, the landlord would probably raise it $200 more and get someone eventually in there. And even if he had to wait a while, the rent would be so high it wouldn't even matter. A caller called in when we had a song playing and said that they walk around and see empty houses everywhere and they wonder about it. And you know what a lot of that is? There's a lot of people that have owned houses for so long here that they just leave them empty because they want a huge price and they say they can't afford to rent it for less because it's not market rate. And they just wait and wait and wait until the rain just starts to come down in piles of money for them because they get one renter who makes up that difference in a couple months because the rent's so incredibly high, and then they make back their profit. And one of the most striking examples of that is actually a commercial rental in Live Oak. It used to be a burger place when I was a little kid. It's now a Starbucks at 17th and Portola. Now that building, after it was a burger joint, which was delicious. I remember going there when I was a little kid. It's the cheese factory, I believe. It sat empty for about, I would say, 15 years. And whenever I wondered why it was empty, they said, oh, the landlord says that they won't rent it to anyone because they can't get a price that will make it affordable. Now, you do the math. What's better, taking a slightly reduced rent or leaving your building empty for 15 years? That screams extortion to me, and that's what really bothers me about this empty house problem that this person's talking about. It either is a vacation rental that they're renting out for 10 times as much as they're going to get even on market rates, which are out of hand, or they already paid off the property and they're just sitting on it waiting to get market rate for it, and they do not care. They do not care. Now, the last caller asked about property taxes when they did actually touch the housing point. Renters pay that. Renters pay property taxes. Renters pay your property tax. Renters pay your mortgage. Renters pay your interest. Renters pay your homeowner's insurance. And even if you're paying part of that cost, you're building massive equity in the most valuable asset you can own. My uncle almost got fed some Kool-Aid by a friend of his who said, oh, renting isn't that much of a profitable business because da-da-da-da-da. He said, because they have all these costs and stuff, and they could just put it in treasury bills for 5% a year and they could make more. False. Because if you have to have $1 million in treasuries to make the 5% on $1 million. Comparing it to $1 million home is what I'm doing. With $1 million home, you need a couple $100,000 as a down payment, and then you're making money on the appreciation of it, and someone is backfilling your $1 million. They're paying the $1 million for you by renting it. And that is the craziest part about this whole thing for me, is it's the only investment you can have that just rains down cash into the cavity of your investment, filling it up for you and making it so that you don't even have to have $1 million. It's like you open up a big tank and you just let the rain of rent money just pour right in. Now I want to talk about this. I want to circle back to the comment made to me at that Super Bowl party about someone thinking that rent control got passed. Rent control did not get passed in Santa Cruz. A regulation related to rental prices got passed in Santa Cruz. And it says that if your rent goes up to an amount that you say you can't, it's self-reporting only. If you cannot afford that, if you say you can't afford that and you're going to have to move because of that rental increase, then your landlord has to give you 2 months' rent to help you move. But what if they raise it 50% or 70% and then you can't afford that and they give you 2 months' rent? They're going to make back that investment in 3 months or 4 months, and then they're going to make massive profits. So a lot of people, myself included, have argued that this one rent regulation is in fact an invitation to drastically raise rents. And there is a city council that is open to more rent regulations. Sounds like they're going to do it piecemeal. One of them said, as his last comment, Justin Cummings said, and his last comment as a resident that's not a city council member before he became one, that he's not interested in pushing through Measure M. He's not interested in just shoving it in people's faces. He's interested in talking with people. I believe Drew Glover and Chris Crone and Sandy Brown are all interested in talking with people and making something that can work and is very complicated and involves many parties. So anyone who likes to call communism, I don't think they're communists. They seem like cool people to me. And it's going to go on for a while. And that's why I encourage myself and everyone else to follow this. If I were you, I might go to some of the meetings, even if you're too shy to get on the mic. Go and take notes. Go and see what's going on in your community. You know? I'm also tired of the Flip This House ads. Have you heard these? The Flip This House ads? The guy that had that show? He goes around and does seminars saying he'll show you the target communities for his system of how to buy properties with other people's money and make income off of them and then flip them and then rent them out at huge prices and with other people's money. And he says with other people's money like 4 times, and he puts out these ads on Pandora and on the radio saying you can sign up to come to his seminar free in the Santa Cruz and Monterey area and the San Francisco area and the Seattle area. And he comes through here all the time. And it's like, hey, you want to join a pyramid scheme? Let's do this. I don't like the fact that someone can just come in and put those ads on the radio and pitch that he's having people buy properties to make money using other people's money. I know Donald Trump's our president, but I still don't want that to be the way that our country runs. And if we let this issue go too long, it's going to be like the caller from the bus said, that by the time you get any rent regulations that mean anything, all the people that needed them are going to be gone. I also am not trying to make a nativist argument. I understand that in some cases, if you have kids and then they have kids and you got 3 generations of every family that had been there to begin with, that eventually you end up with too many people in your town. And that's how things spawn off into new cities. But I don't agree with the fact that we should just heartlessly boot everyone out, saying that if you don't have the money to live here, get out. It's a privilege to live here. This will continue. Next week, I'm going to have Dr. Dudley Danoff on to talk about really the opiate cartel. El Chapo's on trial. Our opiate kingpins give money to museums, and they're highly respected in the community. we say, wow, look at that $10 million they gave to the museum. Yeah, it's because they have $13 billion in the bank. And okay, new law. This is from a caller or a texter. New law, no one can own more than 2 homes, eat the rich. Not sure if that's sarcasm or not. It's a fun little Jello Bay Afro inspired quote there. I'm going to get out of here. This has been super fun. I'm Dan Wu. Next week, we got opiate cartel talk. Like I said, the opiate cartels in Mexico are on trial right now and being hunted down. The opiate cartels in America are celebrated for their donations to museums and all the philanthropic work they do with their $13 billion, while everyone from coal miners to professional athletes die of opioid addictions. So, yeah, I hope he's down for that level of conversation next week. That will be at noon on Monday, February 11th. See you then. If you still live here,